Today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast is sponsored by Jagged Mountain Knives. Jagged Mountain Knives is the perfect handcrafted knife that can fit your capabilities and performance standards. Between their various forms of craftsmanship as well as materials, you truly can find the perfect knife for you or a loved one. Not only does Jagged Mountain offer their own custom apparel and knives, but they also offer knife sharpening. So if you own a restaurant or have knives at home that you need sharpened for your kitchen, contact Jagged Mountain Knives today and save 10% on your order. Once again, contact Jagged Mountain Knives today and save 10% on your entire order. Their link will be down in my description below. Thank you, Jagged Mountain Knives, for sponsoring today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast dedicated to self-development, self-improvement, and helping you achieve the goals that you've laid forth in your life. I'm your podcast host, Brandon Davis, and on today's episode, for everyone either listening on their various platforms or watching, we have my new friend, Justin Prince. Justin is someone I met a few weeks ago at a big event that my company was throwing, and he was dropping a lot of wisdom on all of us about his early successes, his early failures, and kind of what it means to be successful in both business as well as relationships and families, and just to be a great guy overall. I was super inspired after I heard Justin speak, so I reached out to him and his assistant, and I was like, Justin, I'd love if you came on the Get Over Yourself podcast to share some of that wisdom with my listeners as well, and he graciously accepted. So Justin, thanks for joining us on today's episode. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Honored to be on with you.
Well, perfect, guys. As I mentioned, we're going to be going and dissecting a little bit of Justin's early life, kind of some of the struggles he went through early on, and how he's actually became one of the most influential figures around the world. He's spoken internationally, and he has done conferences for both businesses and individuals. So guys, with all that being said, let's jump into today's episode. So Justin, to kind of framework a little bit and give the audience a better sense of who you are, can you tell us a little bit about your early upbringing, kind of what your family situation was like, and then we'll kind of progressively take it forward where we jump into kind of where you're at today.
Yeah. So, I'm from kind of a middle-class family. You know, at age 12, my folks got divorced. We moved 13 times kind of in the teenage years through the high school years. At age 21, during the high school years and shortly thereafter, I had really kind of mindless jobs. I was working at making pizzas. I was doing construction work. And then at 21, I started working at a mall kiosk. And I tease people that the mall's where all of us used to go when the Amazon was a river. So like when you go to the mall, there's these kiosk workers that would, try and suck you into their mall kiosk. And so I worked as a mall kiosk worker, and I sold animated Bible videos, and it was introduced me to sales. Prior to that point, I just only done kind of per hour work, and that was all commission. And so I did that for a number of years. I always kind of had bigger dreams, bigger goals. I had a semester and a half of college. My wife and I got married when I was 22. We had a baby when I was 23. And so I was now providing for a family. And so I was just like, man, I had big dreams and big goals, but I had no college education. I'm working at a mall, and I didn't really know kind of like how I was going to pull it off. So when I was 25, I was introduced to my first business, and I was kind of skeptical at first, but man, once I kind of like got over my skepticism, I was like, I'm going to go for this. And I just went like full tilt, full speed into this business. And eventually, or ultimately, the company that we were distributing their nutritional products for, the company itself actually went out of business. And so like the main, kind of parent company. So when that happened, I was like, in a really precarious financial situation. I was below zero financially. I was back on credit cards. I was back on taxes. At one point, we moved my pregnant wife and our now 2 kids into the loft of my wife's parents' garage. And so I'm a grown man. I live in the United States of America. I'm 27 years old, and I'm living in the loft of my wife's parents' garage. My 2 kids are sleeping in the closet. I'm working. I went and picked up 2 part-time jobs. I worked during the weekday or weeknights, and then I would work on the weekends traveling, selling again. And so just kind of grinding. And I was like, going through that season where you're wondering, you kind of wonder like if you're crazy and like if this is ever going to work for you, and like do you have what it takes to pull it off? And I remember listening to an audio series by a guy named Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn, for those of you that know Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins' original mentor. And Jim Rohn had a weekend seminar where he had all of these great speakers, like all these kind of famous personal development speakers come speak. And at the very end, like his last talk, he gets up at the very end, he says, we now have enough testimonials and enough personal experiences to conclude that it's possible to create and to design an extraordinary life. And I remember driving in my white Toyota Corolla with 250,000 miles in it, working 2 part-time jobs, kids are sleeping in the closet. And I'm like, I know it's possible for other people to create and to design an extraordinary life. I just didn't know if it was going to be possible for me, to create and design an extraordinary life. And ultimately, I started a second business when we were in the loft of my wife's parents' garage. I ultimately got that business to work and, started traveling and speaking all over the world and, just kind of sharing my success story and building my business. And, I spoke, in Moscow and Russia and Almaty, Kazakhstan through the former Soviet Union. I spoke, for 6,000 people at our company's big kind of annual event. So it started to like really take off. I ended up selling that business. And then for the next 2 years, I did private equity consulting. And then my current business about 10 years ago, I came in originally as a consultant to a company that was a 25-year-old company. It was a couple $100 million a year in global revenue, but it had 8 years of declining revenue, like double digits per year decline. Like it was going the wrong direction for 8 consecutive years. And as I was watching this happen, I was like, man, I came in, they're like, yo, we want to completely transform this company. So we tore it down to the floorboards and rebuild it. And the odds of this working, like doing a turnaround and a startup all at once, were like super, super slim. Right. The chance that this was going to pan out. And so we ended up creating a brand called Modere. We created a business model called Social Retail. It was a really simple sharing model with an app and a $10 discount code. And we built this global community of social marketers, people that were paid to refer customers to our site. And we taught them how to make money on social media. So anyway, with that model, we kind of eventually figured that thing out. It took us about 4 years to really kind of get it cranked up. But we put in over 4 million customers, did over 2.4 billion in revenue, and it's turned into this incredible business. And so that's turned into, I've spoken in 30 countries around the world, and you have like your investment business now, and you just have all these different things happening. And so I look back now, and I now get to add my name to that list of people that get to share with all of your listeners, that from my own personal experience and from my own personal testimonial, that it's possible for them to create and to design an extraordinary life. Like I now get to share with people, like I get to look them in the eye, or they get to hear my voice and be like, dude, it's possible for you, because I didn't know if it was going to be possible for me. And I, kind of leaned on, the experiences of other people. And now I get to be one of those people that are telling you that your dreams and your goals are possible.
So let me ask you this, Justin. I'm sure as you were living with your 2 kids in the closet, your wife right next to you, and you're just up in the loft of this garage, right? At the time, if you can kind of walk us through your mindset a little bit, you're probably thinking, wow, I have these young kids, I'm married, and I'm living with my parents' family, right? And especially at a time where you were young, right? You guys were young, you're thinking we have our entire lives in front of us. But I'm sure it was very difficult and a humbling experience to think like, okay, maybe I should rethink this whole like college experience. Maybe I should go back and do that. Maybe I should go full force on sales. This first business didn't really pan out. Like, what was your mindset thinking? And can I actually accomplish this for my family? Like, am I a complete failure? Like, what was going through your head at that moment?
It's a really interesting question, because the truth is kind of like all of those things go through your head. Like on one hand, you're like, I got this, I can figure it out. On the other hand, you're like, when I say maybe not at the exact same moment, maybe at a different day, you're kind of like,
correct.
Right? Should I just, scrap this whole business idea and just like go get a sales job? Then on a different day, it's like success was so close, you felt like you could taste it. And then on a different day, it felt so far away. And then, there's many times when you're like working the 2 part-time jobs. Like I'd kiss my little kids, my 2 little babies, and they're in the closet. I'd kiss them in the morning when they were asleep. I'd work all day, get home late at night and kiss them on the cheek when they were asleep, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And so you kind of go through a combination of all of those emotions, really, just kind of a combination of all of those feelings and emotions of like, is it possible for me? Like, can I pull this thing off? I think a couple things that are really, really important. The first one is you want to listen to people who believe in you and people who tell you that you can. You know, a friend of mine sat next to former President Ronald Reagan at a National Charity Awards dinner in Washington, D.C., and they're up on a podium, you know, next to the podium, up on a stand, and then everyone else is in round tables down in the audience, and they're eating their kind of banquet food. And my friend turns to President Reagan. He says, "Mr. President," he said, "how did you become the two-term president of the United States?" And Ronald Reagan says, "You know, it's interesting." He said, when I was a young boy, I told my friends I wanted to play football. My friends all laughed at me, and they're like, "Ron, you're going to get crunched out there. You're just a little guy. Like you're like
too small for it."
Field, you know. And he goes, "I ultimately played high school football." He said, "I listened to those who believed in me, and I listened to those who told me that I could." He said, "When I was a football player, I told some friends I wanted to become a famous actor and move to Hollywood." And his friends were like, "Dude, what are you talking about? Like, you're a football player. What do you know about acting?" So he ultimately became a famous actor, moved to Hollywood. And he said, "I listened to those who believed in me, and I listened to those who told me that I could." He said, "When I was an actor, I told some friends that I wanted to become the governor of the state of California." And they're like, "Bro, with all due respect, you're an actor. Like, what do you know about becoming the governor?" He ultimately became the governor of the state of California. He said, "I listened to those that believed in me, and I listened to those that told me that I could." And he said, "When I was a governor, I told some friends I want to become the president of the United States of America." And they're like, "Man, you're a governor. Like, what do you know about becoming a president?" You know, and he ultimately became a two-term president of the United States, one of the more impactful presidents in U.S. history. He said, "Because I listened to those who believed in me, and I listened to those who told me that I could." And I share that with you to say this. Like, you want to surround yourself with people that believe in your potential. Like, they believe in your future. They believe in what you can accomplish. And I think one of the biggest challenges we have, particularly when we're young, is where we get so, we give a lot of weight to the words of people that don't believe in us. They're people that tell us that we can't do it or to play smaller, whether it's family or friends or whoever it is. And you want to surround yourself with people, give more weight to the words of those that are like, "Yo, you got this," particularly people that maybe have either accomplished it themselves or people that really believe in, kind of see who you could become. And as I look back, that's one of the things that I felt like I did. I was a part of the mindset I had, is I just kind of listened to people that kept saying, "Hey, you got this, hang in there, you're going to get through this." And so that's one of the things I like to share with people now is like, your dreams and goals are possible, and it's possible for you to create and design an extraordinary life. And your dreams and goals are planted. Like your life has purpose and value and meaning. You're not just here by accident. And so you want to chase that stuff, chase those dreams, chase those goals, go make those things happen.
So Justin, I want to take that from a framework of probably your family's perspective at the time. That's an extraordinary story, and I feel like that's one we can all kind of relate to. There's been people in our corners who have said, "No, that's probably not a smart idea." And granted, sometimes are they correct? Yes. Like if it's your mom looking out for you and she's like, "Should you really do that?" She has your best interest in mind. But I like the concept of surround yourself with these people who are always going to motivate you, who are going to challenge you to go and do it, and it pushes you. But going once again back to your early stage, right? You're working, you kiss the kids right before they wake up as you head off to work, and then you kiss them when they're already asleep, right? You're missing these entireties of the day. How much of a support was your wife or even your wife's parents at the time? And what kind of credit do you give them towards your success today?
Yeah. So my wife was like instrumental, she was a real rock. She honestly believed in me more than I believed in me a lot of those times. And I think it's hard when wives have husbands that aren't supportive, or husbands have wives that aren't supportive. That is really, really, really challenging. She was just like, "Hey, you got this. You're going to figure it out." Like, she just really believed in me that I was going to, particularly on the days that I was just like ready to kind of give up,
Right.
And so she was she was willing to be kind of like, to go through the grind with me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't have to have it all today. Like, she was willing to kind of go through the season and that grind and go figure it out together, which I was just so grateful for. Like, she didn't put, too much pressure on me to have like everything like right now, And now today, like, we have, probably more than we have ever dreamed we would ever have, And so we got there, but during that season, she was willing to just be kind of humble and like just grind through it. So that was huge. I felt like there's a great book called Think and Grow Rich. It's one of the greatest kind of success and personal development books ever written. In fact, it probably is the best-selling one of all time. And Napoleon Hill wrote it. Napoleon Hill's life was financed by W. Clement Stone for 22 years. So it took Napoleon Hill 22 years to do it. W. Clement Stone was paying for his mortgage, paying for his kids' soccer. Like, he just financed his whole life. So what Napoleon Hill did is he went and interviewed 500 of the most successful people in human history, or in U.S. history, pardon me. So this was like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, like some of the people that are the original kind of, they weren't the founders of the country, but they were the founders of the enterprise of the country. Like, that's when the
kind of gave them the framework.
Yeah, the framework started really, like with the railroads and like the light and just, electricity, the whole thing, cars. And so in that book, of the 500 people he interviewed, all 500 of them independently said that they all had what they called well-intentioned family and friends that told them they couldn't do it or that they shouldn't do it. So they weren't bad people. They were well-intentioned, and they were family and friends. It was like the mother-in-law or the mom or the sister or their brother or the spouse or like their best friend that was like, you shouldn't do this anymore. Like, you're not good at this. And they all had well-intentioned family and friends that told them they couldn't do it. All of the the Carnegies and the Henry Fords of the world and the Edisons of the world. So you do want to give weight to the words of those that believe in you, because even your well-intentioned people will kind of try to hold you down. I'll give you another quick analogy. They just did a study a number of years ago with fleas. So if you put fleas in a little jar and you put a lid on it, a flea can jump 36 to 48 inches straight up. So in other words, a flea can jump 3 to 4 feet straight up in the air. When they put them in the jar, after 3 hours, so not 3 years, not 3 months, not 3 weeks, not even 3 days, 3 hours, they could take the lid off and the fleas would only jump to where the lid once was. So in other words, they'd become conditioned very, very rapidly to play way smaller than they could. Like, they could jump out, but they were conditioned. What was really interesting in the study is that the fleas reproduced, and the next generation of fleas, they all could jump 4 feet straight up in the air. They would jump to where the lid once was for the example of those that they saw. And so a lot of times people around us have become conditioned to kind of just play it safe or play it small or just do the traditional thing. And so they try and condition us. And sometimes you have to get around people that are like, there's a different way to do this. And you have to believe in yourself that you can do it to where you can actually jump 4 feet straight up in the air. Like, in other words, you have the potential within you. And so just playing that smaller role is not, people are conditioned and they're trying to condition you. And it's one of the reasons podcasts like this and others are so helpful, is because they can help you to like change your conditioning, change the wiring to where you realize, man, I can jump 4 feet, not 4 inches,
And would you credit your changing conditioning, just like this flea example, would you credit that towards the seminar you went to, where they had all these testimonials and said, you can have this unbelievable life, you can do it, all these people already did before you can be one of them? Or was there some other life-changing moment, or just little things that kind of stacked on top of each other? Yeah,
that's a great question. So I did a magazine interview a number of years ago, and they're like, how did this happen? Like, how did you go from like divorced family, no college education, failed business to like, a couple billion in sales?
Right.
And to me, it was 4 things. It's a combination of 4 things. So it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of 4 things. So it's what I call read, listen, surround, apply. So the first thing is I read great books. The books you read will define you. I read great books. And the average American worker reads less than 1 book after high school. So they average 0. And the top CEOs in America average 60 books a year. So it's a 60, let's call it 60 to 1 ratio. It's actually less than that. And so you want to read great books. Now, in income, the average American worker, for every dollar they make, the top CEOs don't make, they don't make $50 or $100. They make $319 to 1. So it's a 1 to 60 ratio in books, and it's a 319 to 1 ratio in income. And I'm not suggesting the only difference between the average worker and the top CEOs is the amount of books there is. I'm not suggesting that. However, that's one thing that you can count, and the books you read will define you. And top leaders and top earners, they're readers, like they're studiers. So I'm like an avid learner, I was pouring into my mind through books. Second thing is listening. Like, you want to listen to inspiring information. Like, I consumed a ton, and I still do, a ton of information through Audible. So through audio. I'll give you an example. If you were to listen to a book on Audible for an hour a day is a book a week. A book a week's 52 a year. And so you can start to just be it's what I call I equals IO. So it's input in equals input out. If you want to change the inputs out, whether it's the mindset, the words, the actions, if you want to change all the inputs out, you have to change all the inputs in. So like, you're reading different things, you're listening to different things, like you're taking the inputs in and changing the inputs out. Third thing is, for me, was surrounding myself with great people. I surrounded myself with great people. Like I sought mentorship. I was hungry to learn, like really, really, really hungry to learn. You can't teach hunger, you can't teach hustle, and you can't teach humility, where people are like anxious to learn. And so I was hungry, just that hustle I had. So you read, you listen, you surround, and then number 4 is you apply. You got to apply what you learn. So Da Vinci said, "It's he that doeth the deed that hath the power." If you want the power, you got to do the deed. You can't just get you can't just get there without the application. So you could read all the great books, you could listen to all the right stuff, you could surround yourself with the great people, but man, if you don't apply it, and so even like a podcast like this, one thing I would encourage you to be thinking about is like take one thing that you'll hear today, just one thing. And so you ask, okay, what's the one thing I can apply, and go apply it. And you never want to leave the site of inspiration without taking action. So maybe you kind of get inspired to like, man, maybe I need to maybe what I need to do is I need to, make that phone call or return that phone call or do that post or reach out to that person, or I need to take action, or I need to say, I'm sorry, or I need to initiate this. Like take action, do something that takes action, leaving this podcast. That's how you start creating momentum. The next physical action, the next physical step is how you start creating positive momentum. So as I look back, that's kind of how I felt like I did it. Like is, read, listen, surround, apply. Those kind of a combination of those 4 things.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that, Justin. And that actually leaves a perfect segue into closing out today's episode. Guys, we are going to break this Justin episode into 2 different parts. This will be part 1, and part 2 will be released next Friday. So if you want to keep hearing from Justin and all the wisdom he has shared, make sure to come back to next Friday's episode so we can continue to hear from Justin and his great wisdom. And just remember, it'll all be okay. Just take a step back and continue to grow mentors around you and believe and grow confidence in yourself.